Good morning, I'm Meriah, and this is Caroline, and unfortunately we don't have a new shipment of books this week. Caroline is pretty sure we're going to be getting some next week, so we're really hoping. So instead, this morning we thought we would do a quick, what was some of our favorite reads in 2018. And so I will start. First one I've got is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. Technically this was written in 2017, but I read it in 2018, and a lot of its sequels came out in 2018. So this is the story of Murderbot, Murderbot, an android who, in the very first paragraph of the first page, tells us that it hacked its governor module with the plan of murdering everyone and calling himself Murderbot, and but then discovers the feed of all the TV shows and media it could consume, and decides to do that instead.
It's what happens if the internet becomes sentient, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the poor thing is so socially awkward that it can't remove its helmet and look anybody in the face. So it's it's funny, it's light. The whole thing is very short, and it's a novella, and there's 4 of them now, so you can read each one in an evening. They're fun action adventure novels. So I give it 2 thumbs up.
And you'll really be touched. Murderbot is a heartwarming, charming little creature.
It is. He is. Yes, she is.
It
is. Yeah.
All right, my turn. So my first book is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. It's out right now because it's super popular.
It's so good.
It's a true crime book by Michelle McNamara, who passed away actually before it was published, which is really sad.
And before they discovered who
the killer is. So its subtitle is One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer. And she's the one that invented the moniker Golden State Killer, because in the 70s there was, it's awful, grisly, 50 rapes, 10 murders, and when DNA came out, started connecting them all together, and so it wasn't until like the late 80s, early 90s that they started realizing that it was all the same person. And Michelle McNamara has a history of true crime investigations as a hobby. She had a blog called True Crime Daily. She was helpful in finding the Green River Killer. She was good at what she did. And then she found out about the East Area Rapist, as he was called at the time, and she became obsessed. So it's beautifully written.
So beautifully written.
It's grisly, and the details are there, but also it's very much about the victims. It's giving them life again, and also it's very much about Michelle McNamara as well, and it's like a portrait of 2 people, light and dark. The Golden State Killer is awful, and then Michelle McNamara and her obsession kind of lightens it up. She retains her humor. She says that unmasking a killer takes away their power, and that's what her desire is, to take away his power, to put him out into the light and show that he's just some awful person as opposed to this boogie monster that hovers over you. It's a hard read, but good, and it's worth remembering that they did catch him. So she doesn't know, the book didn't know it was published before.
But it doesn't matter when you read it.
But it helps to remember that when you're reading.
Yeah, it does help to.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
So if you're a true crime fan, really good. If you like kind of psychological thrillers, really good. Recommend. Meriah also read it.
Yes. What a beautiful writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my next one of my favorite books I read this year was Lethal White by Robert Galbraith, who is of course J.K. Rowling's pseudonym. This is the 4th in her Detective Cormoran Strike series, and this one is about a very disturbed young man who shows up at Cormoran Strike's office, saying that he had seen a little girl murdered, but before Cormoran can get any information out of him, he runs away, and so Cormoran's trying to discover both who this guy is and what actually happened with this supposed murder. It's I listened to the audiobook, and it's Robert Glenister who's read it. He's also narrated the other audiobooks. He's very talented, and it also has, keeps going with the will they, won't they relationship between Cormoran and Robin, his partner. So I really enjoyed it. It was a great read, and J.K. Rowling is a fantastic. As we all know, surprise! She's very good at what she does. So I'd recommend it, and I'd recommend the audiobook.
Okay, my next book is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. It's her very first book, her debut novel, and it's quick. It's a quick read. It's a quick, fun read, pretty sexy. It's so it starts by a stalled elevator sparks kind of a fake date that leads to muddled emotions, and that's everything I love in a story. Fake relationships. It's really the basis of a lot of fan fiction. So I have a weakness for that. A fake relationship that leads to real emotions. It's fun. It's quick. It's not heavy. You want something to read to take your mind off something. This is it. Recommend.
Perfect. Thanks, Caroline. And my last recommendation for 2018 books, a nonfiction book called Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. It's a story of Elizabeth Holmes, who's a very young woman who started what became I believe her company Theranos was valued at $9 billion just in its first round of investing. It was a blood testing company, and it was supposed to be this blood testing that would revolutionize the industry. And of course, this is no spoilers here. The technology didn't actually work.
It was all a lie.
It was all a lie. So this book reads as a really salacious, like just exactly what happened. How did this young woman, she was supposed to be the next Steve Jobs, how did she get into this situation?
How did she get all these people?
People to believe in her? And John Carreyrou was the journalist who shone the light on exactly what had happened and what was happening. So fascinating read, and a really interesting study on what happens when you've got one of those personalities.
Yeah, cult of personality.
Cult of personality, that everyone will just follow what you're doing and believe in you, and what can happen if you've got this confidence, but then maybe not the.
I felt it was also a little bit of a kind of comment on nepotism, because she had all these connections. Her family was a certain family. They had connections with major investors in Silicon Valley, and so those investors invested, which led other people to be like, oh, he's invested, I should invest in it. Like the worst of what happens when nepotism occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great read. I read it in a weekend. It was highly recommended.
Okay, my last one is How to Invent Everything. I made notes on this one because it's super fun. So, How to Invent Everything by Ryan North. Its subtitle is A Survival Guide for the Stranded Time Traveler. So it's set up as if your time machine has broken in the past, and the only way to get home is for you to restart civilization yourself. So it starts with this fun kind of flow chart to determine where you are in time. So it's questions like, are there plants? Are there dinosaurs? Has the Big Bang happened? Which I feel like you would notice. And then he's like, if you're about 200,000 years ago, then congratulations, you're about to be the most important person in history. So it's pop science, really, but framed as a how-to guide for a time traveler. And it begins with like how you start, by introducing the 5 major technologies that are required for civilization to exist. And they're the spoken language, written language, non-sucky numbers. So instead of just like tallies on a wall, actual numbers, he suggests fractions and the zero, because the zero is really important. And then the scientific method and calorie surplus. So introduce agriculture and domesticate animals, because you don't want to spend all your time hunting and gathering. And then it's full of wry humor. It's organized really brilliantly, things like birds and the bees, and then he talks about mosquitoes and what mosquitoes to avoid. And it's fun, it's thoughtful, there's really genius footnotes, and I love a snarky footnote, so I'm just going to read one here because I think it's hilarious. If you don't know what hydrocarbon chain looks like, it's not important. Just imagine a tiny caterpillar. If you don't know what a caterpillar looks like, just imagine a cute fuzzy worm. And if you have no idea what a worm looks like, we are sorry to inform you that you may have problems that extend beyond the scope of this book. So it's pop science. It's a really great way to learn random facts about stuff, and as we all know, I am obsessed with facts. But the way it's written is really clever, and it's quite funny. I recommend. How to Invent Everything, Ryan North.
Fantastic. Well, we had a hard time narrowing all of our books down to just a short video's worth, but thank you. And if you feel like it, please post in the comments what your favorite books of this year.
Let us know. We're always looking for good book recommendations.
Absolutely. And we should be back next week with some new books. So we'll see you next week.
Bye.